أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سنة من قد أرسلنا قبلك من رسلنا ولا تجد لسنتنا تحويلا. أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر إن قرآن الفجر كان مشهودا. ومن الليل فتهجد به نافلة لك عسى أن يبعثك ربك مقاما محمودا. أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر إن قرآن الفجر كان مشهودا. ومن الليل فتهجد به نافلة لك عسى أن يبعثك ربك مقاما محمودا. وقل ربي أدخلني مدخل صدق وأخرجني مخرج صدق واجعل لي من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. وقل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا. وننزل من القرآن ما هو شفاء ورحمة للمؤمنين ولا يزيد الظالمين إلا خسارا. وإذا أنعمنا على الإنسان أعرض ونأى بجانبه وإذا مسه الشر كان يئوسا صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على رسول الله وآله الأطهار، على رسول الله وآله الأطهار. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لاش قاسم پہ چلائے اکبر، چھوڑ کر ہم کو بھیا نہ جاؤ. لاش قاسم پہ چلائے اکبر، چھوڑ کر ہم کو بھیا نہ جاؤ. دیکھو خیمے میں شور فغاں ہے، غم میں ہر ایک نوحہ گناہ ہے. بال بکدائے روتی ہے مادر، چھوڑ کر ہم کو بھیا نہ جاؤ. لاش قاسم پہ چلائے اکبر، تم نشانی ہو امو حسن کی، بن گئے آج زینت ویرن کی. ٹکڑے ٹکڑے ہوا جسم اطہر، چھوڑ کر ہم کو بھیا نہ جاؤ. لاش قاسم پہ چلائے اکبر، بال بکدائے بیٹی ہے مادر، خاک ملتی ہے چہرے پہ دکھیا. دیکھو اٹھ کر یہ حسرت کا منظر، چھوڑ کر ہم کو بھیا نہ جاؤ. لاش قاسم پہ چلائے اکبر، اب ہمیں نہ اتنا رلاؤ، رحم کی ضعیفی پہ کھاؤ. دو تسلی تو عام ان کو اٹھ کر، چھوڑ کر ہم کو بھیا نہ جاؤ. لاش قاسم پہ چلائے اکبر، حشر تک ہوگی اب آؤزاری، سب اٹھائیں گے لاشیں تمہاری، بزم ماتم بپا ہوگی گر گر، چھوڑ کر ہم کو بھیا نہ جاؤ، لاش قاسم پہ چلائے اکبر، چھوڑ کر ہم کو بھیا نہ جاؤ، لاش قاسم پہ چلائے اکبر، چھوڑ کر ہم کو بھیا نہ جاؤ۔ محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجہ۔ ہائے قاسم میں تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں کیسے، ہائے قاسم میں تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں کیسے، بولے سرور تیرے مادر کو بتاؤں کیسے، ہائے قاسم میں تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں کیسے، ریت کے زیروں میں گھوڑوں کے سموں سے بیٹا، ریت کے زیروں میں گھوڑوں کے سموں سے بیٹا، خود ہی بتلا میں تجھے ڈھونڈ کے لاؤں کیسے، ہائے قاسم میں تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں کیسے، خاک اور خون میں ڈوبا ہے تمہارا چہرہ، خاک اور خون میں ڈوبا ہے تمہارا چہرہ، اس میں میں پہلے سے تابانی لاؤں کیسے، ہائے قاسم میں تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں کیسے، اور لے گئے ساتھ ہی رہوار تمہارے تن کو، لے گئے ساتھ ہی رہوار تمہارے تن کو، یہ خبر جا کے میں فروا کو سناؤں کیسے، ہائے قاسم میں تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں کیسے، مر نہ جائے کہیں تطہیر کی وارث بن میں تیرے ٹکڑے تیرے پھوپھی کو دکھاؤں کیسے ہائے قاسم میں تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں کیسے مرتبہ تیرا تو زہرا ہی بتا سکتی ہے مرتبہ تیرا تو زہرا ہی بتا سکتی ہے ماتمی میں تیری توقیر بتاؤں کیسے ہائے قاسم میں تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں کیسے ہائے قاسم میں تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں کیسے محمد و آل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد وعجل فرجهم الفاتحہ
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه تبارك وتعالى في محكم كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم ولو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك صدق الله العلي العظيم. As we continue our discussion on the contemporary questions that are faced by Muslims in the world today, we find that a very common question that gets asked pertains to whether a good non-Muslim is better than a bad Muslim. Who is better, a good non-Muslim or a bad Muslim? And this question is especially asked by those who live in the West, who have migrated to the West, and they find that their neighbors and those who are around them are very civil, are very courteous, they are helpful in times of need, and they assume that the same is not the case in other parts of the world. And they are impressed by this behavior of the non-Muslims they find around them. And so a question arises in their minds as to the fate of these non-Muslims. Is it the case that they will be punished in the hereafter because of their disbelief, despite being so good, despite being so kind and so generous? Now, in order to answer this question, we need to clarify three important things. The first is that there is no guarantee that being born a Muslim or being a Muslim or testifying to one's faith in Islam would be enough to get a person into paradise or to attain salvation. Being a Muslim is no guarantee that you will attain salvation in the hereafter, you will be saved from the fire of hell, and you will gain entry into Jannah. Because we know that Islam has its rules and regulations, and Islam expects certain things from believers. So it is not sufficient, therefore, for a person simply to say that I am a Muslim, and that would then give them an entry into paradise. No. The Quran is explicit, and it mentions all the things that are required of believers before they can gain entry into paradise. So that is the first thing. Automatically, we should not think that because one is a Muslim that that person is going to Jannah. And we have found that there are many people in history who claimed to be Muslims, but they committed horrendous acts. First and foremost of which were those who came to fight Abu Abdullah al-Hussein in Karbala. They professed Islam, they claimed to be Muslim, they were praying on the battlefield when the time for Salah came. They were praying to Allah Azza wa Jal, but they had come to kill the Hujjah of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so we find that simply saying that you are a Muslim or simply performing the outward actions required of you because you are a Muslim is not sufficient. Similarly, we know that there were many people, and even today, there are many people who claim to be Muslims, but in reality they do not believe in the tenets of Islam. These individuals are known as the hypocrites, the munafiqun. And the Holy Quran has a whole chapter that talks about the munafiqun. The hypocrites were present from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, and they are present even today. Many people who pretend to be Muslims, but in the depths of their hearts they do not believe in Islam. And so when we look at what the Holy Quran says about the munafiqun, the Quran is very clear and explicit when it says, إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِي الدَّرْكِ الْأَسْفَلِ مِنَ النَّارِ وَلَنْ تَجِدَ لَهُمْ نَصِيرًا. Indeed, the hypocrites are in the lowest reaches of the fire, the lowest stage of Jahannam, meaning that they are the worst of people. That is why they got the lowest stage and the lowest level of Jahannam, and there will be none to help them. So this is something we need to realize. And of course, when we look at history, we find numerous such actions performed by so-called Muslims that would automatically, clearly show us that they are outside the fold of Islam. These individuals cannot be Muslims, even though they profess Islam and they claim to be Muslims. For example, in the early 4th century, there was a group known as the Qaramita. The Qaramita professed Islam. Historians tell us that they attacked the Kaaba and they killed all those pilgrims who had come for Tawaf and for Umrah at the time. And then they proceeded to tear down the cloth of the Kaaba. They broke the door of the Kaaba and they stole the Hajar al-Aswad, the black stone. They stole the black stone, they took it out and they took it with them. They kept the black stone for 22 years. And only after 22 years did they return the Hajar al-Aswad. And so when we read history and we see these kinds of atrocities and horrendous acts carried out by Muslims, this reminds us of the fact that claiming to be a Muslim is not enough to gain entry into paradise. So when we ask the question, who is better, a good non-Muslim or a bad Muslim, then first and foremost we need to clarify that claiming to be a Muslim itself has no value. You may claim to be a Muslim, but if you do not follow the tenets of Islam, then you are only a so-called Muslim. You are only an apparent Muslim. You are not truly a Muslim. So this is something that needs to be clarified first and foremost. The second point that we need to talk about is when you say good versus bad, what do you mean by good? How can you tell when a person is good or not? Is it that when you see a person who smiles a lot, who talks to you in a very polite manner, that they are automatically good? A person who is very courteous to you, is that person good? Is that the gauge of goodness in your eyes? That cannot be the gauge for goodness. Indeed, when Shaitan came to Adam and Hawa in paradise, he too came with a smile on his face. He too convinced them that he was their well-wisher. So does it mean that Shaitan was good? Look at what the Quran says. وَقَاسَمَهُمَا إِنِّي لَكُمَا لَمِنَ النَّاصِحِينَ. He swore to them, I am indeed your well-wisher. When Shaitan came to beguile Adam and Hawa, peace be upon them, what happened? He didn't come as an enemy. He came as a friend. He came with smiles. He came with kind words. He swore to them that he only wanted what was best for them. And so it is not sufficient because somebody talks to you nicely and is polite, then that person automatically is good. So how do you then gauge who is good and who is not good? It is very difficult because we as human beings, we cannot gauge and we do not know what is in the heart of a person. What is a person's intent? So we only look at what we can perceive. We only look at what is apparent to us. Let us take an example to show how it is very difficult to gauge what is good and what is not. A man once came to the masjid and he found that there was no place to tie his horse. He thought to himself, there is no place here where you can tie your horse. Many people would need such a place. And so he takes a large nail and hammers it into the wall. And he ties his horse, thinking to himself that in the future, if anyone else needs a place to tie their horse, they can use this nail. So that was a good act, was it not? After a while, somebody comes and sees that nail, that huge nail hammered into the wall of the masjid. And he thinks to himself, who would put a nail here? Not only has he spoiled the wall of the masjid, but it is dangerous to have a nail here. If somebody were to lean on this wall and mistakenly lean on this nail, it could harm the person. So immediately he takes out that nail from the wall. Now, the question is, was putting the nail into the wall a good deed or was removing it a good deed? These are two opposites. If you say both are good, then how can two opposites be good? Putting it in, taking it out. And so we find that it is very difficult. It all depends on the niyyah, the intention of the person. In reality, both their intentions were good. And we need to examine so many different factors. The location of the nail, the size of the nail, was it appropriate to put it there or not? And once we know all these things, only then can we judge whether it was a good act or not. Furthermore, many times people only act good because they want to maintain their reputations in the community, because they want to portray themselves as virtuous people. But the moment they can get away with being evil, they no longer act in a virtuous manner. There is a very interesting example given by Plato, the Greek philosopher Plato. He mentions the example of the ring of Gyges. The ring of Gyges was a mythical artifact which was magical in nature. And we are told that Gyges was a shepherd. And one day an earthquake takes place and a cave is revealed near the place where he was tending his flock. So Gyges enters that cave and he finds a tomb in it. And when he opens the tomb, he finds a corpse of a man wearing a big ring. That ring impressed Gyges, so he took the ring and he pocketed it. Then, after a while, as he was looking at the ring and trying to wear it, he found out that this ring had magical powers. Whoever wore the ring and adjusted it in a certain way, that person would become completely invisible. Now, with the power of invisibility that Gyges had just discovered, he used that power of invisibility to seduce the queen and to murder the king of the time, and then he himself became the king. Now, after mentioning this story, the question is posed that is it that human beings only behave virtuously because they know people can see them? And so it is argued that human beings only behave virtuously as a social contract. Morality is a social contract, meaning that you are doing it only because you want to maintain your status in society. The moment you can get away with doing evil without being caught, then most people would go for the evil option. And this is what is argued in Plato's work. Of course, Socrates later argued that Gyges only did this because he was following his vain desires. Morality is not a social contract. If a person is truly virtuous and good, then whether somebody is looking at them or not, whether they can get away with evil or not, they will continue to be virtuous. So this is an argument between philosophers, a debate, a discussion between philosophers about the intrinsic nature of human beings. But when we look at our world today, we find indeed it is the case that many people who behave in an apparently good way, very virtuous, very righteous, very courteous and polite, when they can get away with evil, then they completely transform. And an example of this is when the blackouts happen. We know that in the Western world, in America, for example, there have been instances where when blackouts happen, then automatically now the CCTV cameras are offline and people cannot be identified, so we find people breaking into shops, into supermarkets, and starting their looting. Looting on a wide scale starts because of these blackouts. And this is something that has happened before our eyes, so we know that this is a reflection of the idea that people are only good as a social contract or are only good in order to maintain their reputation in society. However, morality is not deeply ingrained in them. So now, once we understand this, then again we pose that question: how can you know a person is good? Is it simply because your neighbor helped you to change your tire when you got a puncture that now he is, mashallah, a very good person even though he's a non-Muslim? Is it only because your neighbor sent you some birthday cake that now he's very good? How can you gauge the goodness of a person based on these trivial matters? It is not possible to do so, and it is also incorrect to do so. Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, one of the contemporary scholars of the Shia world, has a very interesting discussion when he comes to the question of the good deeds that are acceptable by Allah Azza wa Jal. He says for a good deed to be acceptable by Allah Azza wa Jal, it needs two things. One is husn fi'li and the second is husn fa'ili. This means that both the doer of the deed has to be good and the deed itself has to be good. It is not sufficient for the deed to be good but the doer not to be good. And examples of this are many. Sometimes we may think that a deed is good, an action is good, but it is done for the wrong reasons. For example, a person worships Allah Azza wa Jal, or a person gives charity, but they do it only to show off, only to show how virtuous they are, how pious they are, how generous they are. They're not doing it to attain closeness to Allah Azza wa Jal, to please Allah Azza wa Jal. Now that kind of deed, though the deed itself may look very good, but because the person who is doing it, the intention of that person is not the correct intention, it is not acceptable by Allah Azza wa Jal. Sometimes the intention of a person may be good, but the action which seems to be good is actually evil. There is an interesting anecdote mentioned in our books of hadith, in which we are told that Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam was informed about an individual who was very good in the eyes of the people. The people were praising that individual. They said, MashaAllah, this man, he is very good. He helps the poor, he helps the needy. And they were praising him. So Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam says, I wanted to find out more about this man. So one day I saw the man and I decided to watch him from afar in order to see how he behaves and to verify whether he is truly as good as the people claim he is or not. And so the Imam alayhi salam looks at that man and he finds that the man enters a bakery. And he distracts the baker while he steals 2 loaves of bread. The Imam sees him stealing these 2 loaves of bread and he is surprised. The man then comes out and proceeds to the greengrocer's. The Imam follows him and he sees that again he distracts the greengrocer and he steals 2 pomegranates and he puts it under his cloak. And then he leaves. So the Imam follows him. And after a while, the Imam sees that the man goes to the house of a poor, sick believer, and he places the 2 loaves of bread and the 2 pomegranates in front of that person, and then he leaves. The Imam follows the man until they come to a desolate area in the desert, and the Imam then approaches the man and addresses him, and he says that, O servant of Allah, I have noticed what you have done and I have a question for you. Why is it that you took these 2 loaves of bread and these 2 pomegranates and you actually stole these things and then went and gave the poor sick person? So the man said, who are you? Please introduce yourself. The Imam alayhi salam says, I am just one from the progeny of Adam and from the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alih. But the man insists, and when he insists, he says, I am from the Ahlul Bayt. Where are you from? I'm from Medina. So then he says, could it be that you are Ja'far ibn Muhammad? So Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam says, yes, I am he. So he says, then what value is this lineage of yours when you don't know the Quran? Allahu Akbar. The Imam asks him, what do you mean I don't know the Quran? He says, haven't you read in the Holy Quran where Allah Azza wa Jal says, من جاء بالحسنة فله عشر أمثالها ومن جاء بالسيئة فلا يجزى إلا مثلها. Haven't you read in the Quran where Allah says, whoever performs a good deed, he will be rewarded tenfold, and whoever performs an evil deed will only be requited for that one deed that he performs. Imam says, yes, I have read this in the Quran. So the man says that when I stole those 4 things, I got 4 sayyah, 4 sins were recorded for me. But when I went and gave those 4 things to the poor person, then I got 40 thawab, 40 rewards. So now it means that if I minus 4 from 40, I am already on 36 thawab, 36 rewards. So I am on the positive. I have done something good. The Imam alayhi salam gets upset with him and he says, do you know what you are saying? It seems you do not know the Holy Quran. Haven't you read that Allah says, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah only accepts from the muttaqeen, from the pious, those who fear Allah. By stealing these things, you are already outside the category of muttaqeen, and therefore none of your good deeds are accepted. So in reality, you earned 4 sins for stealing, and when you gave these 4 things to someone else without the permission of the owner, then you earned another 4 sins. So from this example, we find that some people may have an apparent positive niyyah, positive intention, but what they are doing, though they may think is good, is actually evil and wrong. The third point we need to keep in mind when answering the question, who is better, a good non-Muslim or a bad Muslim, is the question of who are we to judge. Already we have seen that many times we cannot distinguish between what is truly a good action and what is not. So we cannot read the intentions of people. We cannot read their innermost thoughts. Only Allah Azza wa Jal is privy to the innermost thoughts of individuals. And so therefore we cannot judge. Only Allah has the license to determine who deserves hellfire and who deserves paradise. And when the question of Jannah or Jahannam comes, we know that there are numerous levels of Jannah. There are darajat of Jannah. So it is not the case that if a non-Muslim is granted entry into Jannah due to his pious actions, that he would be at the same level as a pious, believing Muslim who has also done good actions in his life. There are different levels and there are different stages. Just as in the fire of hell, there are different darakat. Lower stages are called darakat, higher stages are called darajat. And that is why those who are hypocrites, as we had seen in the verse, they are في الدرك الأسفل من النار, at the lowest level of the hellfire. And so even if non-Muslims were to be granted entry into Jannah, that is not something that should worry us. Allah is just, and in His justice He knows who is deserving of what level of Jannah. And therefore we should leave the judgment to Allah Azza wa Jal. We know that some individuals are jahil qasir. They are people who have not accepted Islam and they have not accepted the true religion because they are ignorant about it. They are ignorant about it because they have heard negative things about it and they have heard wrong information. They are misinformed about this religion, and that is why they are keeping away from it. If they were to come to know the truth about Islam, then they would accept it. And so these kinds of individuals are not culpable. They are not blameworthy because they are people with pure hearts. They are only away from the straight path because they are misinformed about it or they have no information about it. And so these kinds of people can attain salvation. Furthermore, we know that on the day of judgment, every individual will come to Allah Azza wa Jal alone. This is very important for us to realize. The Quran says, وَكُلُّهُمْ آتِيهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَرْدًا. And all the people will come to Allah Azza wa Jal on the day of Qiyamah alone. This means that as an individual in this world is unique, His circumstances are unique. His abilities are unique. Everything about an individual is unique. His experiences in life, his thoughts, his intentions, they are all unique. And so every individual has to be judged individually. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that on the day of judgment, we will be judged alone, individually. We are not going to be judged based on what family we come from, what tribe we come from, what community we come from. Everyone's situation and circumstance is unique, and hence we cannot pass judgment in a general manner. It is sufficient for us to know that Allah Azza wa Jal is just, He is fair, and so whatever He judges will be just and fair. So these are the three important points we need to keep in mind in answering the question, who is better, a good non-Muslim or a bad Muslim? The first of which was, being a Muslim is not sufficient to gain entry into paradise. The second is, we cannot even tell what is a good deed or who is truly a good person, because we cannot know the intentions of a person. Sometimes their intentions are bad and their deeds seemingly look good, and sometimes their intentions are good but their deeds are truly bad. And the third thing is that Allah Azza wa Jal is the only one who can judge who deserves paradise and who deserves hellfire. So we should not try and judge or pass judgment or give a verdict about who will go to paradise and who will go to hell. Now, it is important here to mention that being a Muslim requires one to be a person of good character, good akhlaq. Islam has put a lot of emphasis on good akhlaq. And our role model Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih has been described in the Holy Quran as being a person of lofty character. The Quran tells the Prophet, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. O Messenger of Allah, indeed you possess a great character. And also the verse that we recited in the beginning, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. It is by Allah's mercy that you are gentle with them. Had you been harsh and hard-hearted, they would have surely scattered from around you. So the Holy Prophet was a very gentle person, a very kind person, and with that good akhlaq, he was able to win the hearts of the people. We know of the very famous incident where there was a lady who used to put garbage on the path of Rasulullah. She would put thorns and branches on that path, knowing that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would pass by there. And when for 3 days the Prophet noticed that there was no trash and there was no garbage on that road, he inquired about that lady and he went to visit her. And when she saw him, she thought he had come to take revenge. But when he approached her and he spoke politely to her and he said, I have not seen you for 3 days, so I have come to inquire about your well-being, about your health. Upon seeing the character of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she accepted Islam. And there are so many incidents similar to this in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that show us how he won the hearts of the people with his excellent character. And he is our role model. He is the exemplar whom we have to follow in our lives. And so it is important, therefore, that we too should have such a good character. And when they look at our good character, non-Muslims should be attracted towards Islam. In the life of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam also, we note that he uses this same method to bring people closer to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. When a man comes from Syria and he comes to Medina and he meets Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam and he starts speaking against him, he starts verbally abusing the Imam. The Imam alayhi salam is with his companions, but he is quiet, he says nothing. The man continues verbally abusing the Imam. Then the Imam tells him, "Oh brother, it seems that you are a foreigner, you are a stranger in Medina. If you need anything, please come to us. If you need food, clothing, or shelter, we are at your service." The man is taken aback. He has abused the Imam, but instead of replying him in kind, the Imam has only kind words and polite words for him. Immediately the man begins to weep and he says, Yabna Rasulillah, I have made an error. I have made a mistake in saying all those things to you. Please forgive me. And the Imam forgives him. And so this is the effect of good akhlaq and good character. When we turn to the traditions, we find that there are numerous riwayat and ahadith that talk about the importance of husnul khuluq, good character. There are too many to mention, but I only want to mention two here to give us a sense of the importance of good akhlaq. One companion narrates, دخلت على الصادق جعفر بن محمد عليه السلام. I visited Imam al-Sadiq عليه السلام وعنده نفر من الشيعة, and some of his Shia were with him at the time. فسمعته وهو يقول, I heard him addressing them and saying, معاشر الشيعة كونوا لنا زينا ولا تكونوا علينا شينا. قولوا للناس حسنا احفظوا ألسنتكم وكفوها عن الفضول وقبيح القول. The Imam alayhi salam was addressing his Shia and he told them, be a source of pride for us and don't be a source of disgrace for us. Speak kindly to the people and protect your tongues from speech that is excessive and evil. Now here we find that the Imam alayhi salam is addressing the Shia and he uses that very famous phrase, Kunu lana zayna, be an adornment for us, a source of pride for us. وَلَا تَكُونُوا عَلَيْنَا شَيْنًا, do not be a source of humiliation and disgrace for us. This means that as the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, our actions reflect upon the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. The Imams have taught us that we should be people of good character, so that we show that those who follow the Ahlul Bayt have good akhlaq. And indeed, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam tells us in another tradition, كونوا دعاة للناس بغير ألسنتكم. Be people who invite others towards the right path without using your tongues. How can you invite somebody without using your tongue, without using your speech? Through your good character, through your akhlaq. This is very important. And this is something that we as Muslims, especially if we live in non-Muslim countries, we need to display our good character. We need to be the ones about whom people, when they talk about Muslims, they say that Muslims have very good akhlaq, very good character. There was an individual known as Zakaria ibn Ibrahim al-Kufi. He used to be a Christian, but later he converted to Islam and he became one of the companions of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Now, one day he comes from Kufa to Medina and he comes to visit Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and he talks to the Imam and says, Yabna Rasulillah, I have accepted the faith, but my mother is still a Christian. How am I supposed to treat her? How am I supposed to behave with her? The Imam alayhi salam told him, you now have to be even better towards her than you were in the past. So Zakaria goes back home and he begins treating his mother with so much respect, even more so than what he used to do in the past. His mother is surprised, and at one time she tells him, oh my son, what is this? You never used to treat me with so much love and respect as you do now. So Zakaria says, I had gone to my Imam and I had asked my Imam how I should treat you because you are not a Muslim. So he said to me, because I am a Muslim now, I have to treat you, my dear mother, with more respect and more kindness. And that is why I am treating you in this manner. Upon hearing this, his mother is so much moved that she accepts Islam. And this is an example of how one can invite people towards the right path without using speech. And we all know about the famous example of Imam Ali alayhi salam traveling with the dhimmi. And they reach a fork in the road, and the Imam alayhi salam accompanies that dhimmi for some time. When he asks the Imam, I thought you were heading towards Kufa, why are you coming with me? I am going somewhere else. The Imam tells him that our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi has taught us that when we are traveling with a companion and we have to part ways, we should go some distance with them before turning back and heading to our own direction. The dhimmi was very much impressed, and he decides to accompany the Imam to Kufa. Tell me more about your Prophet and his teachings, he tells the Imam. And the Imam explains to him. But when they reach Kufa and Amirul Mu'mineen is welcomed as the Khalifa, and the dhimmi realizes that this man is no ordinary person, rather he's the Khalifa of the Muslims, there and then he accepts Islam. This is the effect of good character, of good akhlaq. So it is very important, therefore, that we realize that we as Muslims should be the ones who have good character. We should not be the ones who wonder about what others will attain because of their good character. Rather, we should be the ones who display the best and loftiest of character. The Holy Quran also tells us that when we want to invite people towards Islam, that we have to do it in a manner which is very good and with a lot of wisdom. The Quran says, "Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'izati al hasana wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan inna rabbaka huwa a'lamu biman dhalla an sabilihi wa huwa a'lamu bil muhtadin." Invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and good advice, and debate with them in a manner that is best. Indeed, your Lord knows best those who stray from his way, and he knows best those who are guided. And therefore, as Muslims, we should be the ones who display the best character, something that other people are impressed by, and in this way they will be attracted towards Islam. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Tonight is the 7th night of Muharram, and we now turn to the Masa'ib of Aba Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam and his companions and his family. And we know that from the 7th night of Muharram, according to what we are told, water is cut off from the tents of Aba Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam. Therefore, it is from this night that we hear the cries of Al-Atash, Al-Atash, from the children who are expressing their thirst in Karbala. Tonight we want to give our condolences to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam for his son Qasim ibn al-Hassan. Who is Qasim? Qasim is that son of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam who was a young man in Karbala, and it is said that from the night of Ashura he was worried about whether he would be given permission to go and fight or not. And so he comes to Aba Abdullah and he says, Ya Amma, will you give me permission to fight tomorrow? The Imam looks at his young nephew, and upon seeing his face, he recollects his brother Hassan alayhi salam. He asks Qasim, Qasim, tell me, what do you think about death? Qasim says to me, death is ahla min al-asal, sweeter than honey. On the day of Ashura, one after the other goes into the battlefield. When the turn for the Banu Hashim comes and they start going into the battlefield, Qasim also comes to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam and he says, Oh my uncle, please give me permission. Imam Hussein looks at him and he says, Oh Qasim, you are the remnant of my brother Hassan. You are the reminder of my brother Hassan. How can I give you permission to go and fight in the battlefield? Qasim is very upset. According to some narrations, he goes to his mother Farwa. In other traditions, his mother is not mentioned, but he finds a letter from his father, Imam al Hassan alayhi salam, addressed to his uncle, Imam al Hussein alayhi salam, and he rushes to his uncle with that letter. And when Imam al Hussein looks at the writing of his brother, Imam al Hassan alayhi salam, tears start flowing down from his eyes. Allah, Allah. He remembers the days when he was with his brother Imam al Hassan alayhi salam. In that letter was written, "O my brother Hussein, a day will come when I will not be by your side. Please allow my son to represent me in Karbala." And Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam begins to weep, and he hugs Qasim and they both weep. And then Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam finally accepts and gives permission to Qasim, but he prepares Qasim with his own two hands. He takes out the ammama of Imam al-Hassan and he places it on the head of Qasim. And finally Qasim is ready to go into battle. Hamid ibn Muslim says that when Qasim came into the battlefield, it was like a bright full moon coming out in the dark of night. He was so handsome. He came out to fight and he was killing many people. At that moment, Umar Sa'ad tells Azraq Shami, Azraq was a very strong and brave warrior. Go and kill this young boy. Azraq thinks to himself, somebody like me facing such a young boy? Instead, he sent his sons. One by one, his sons go to face Qasim, and Qasim kills all of them. Finally, in his rage, Azraq Shami goes to face Qasim. We are told when Azraq comes into the battlefield, Imam al-Hussein is watching from afar. He prays to Allah, "Oh Allah, protect my Qasim from Azraq." Qasim is able to defeat Azraq and kills him. And at that moment then he continues fighting with other people. We are told, however, in the midst of fighting, Qasim's sandal strap gets broken, and so he bends down on his horse to tie his sandal strap. At that moment, one of the Ashqiya comes with a metal rod and strikes him on the back with so much force that we are told that he breaks the back of Qasim. Qasim falls down from his horse. He shouts, "Assalamu alayka ya Amma, adrikni ya Amma." At that moment, Imam Hussein alayhi salam rushes towards the battlefield like a lion. He hears the cries of Qasim, "Adrikni ya Amma, Adrikni ya Amma." Every person who fell in Karbala shouted only once and called the Imam only once and said Adrikni only once. But it was Qasim who kept shouting Adrikni, Adrikni, Adrikni. Some say it is because when Imam rushed into the battlefield like a lion, the enemy was so much afraid of the Imam that the right flank moved onto the left flank and the left to the right, and in between was the body of Qasim being trampled. He is the only Shaheed in Karbala who was trampled while he was alive, and each time the horses would step on him he would shout, "Adrikni ya Amma, Adrikni ya Amma." إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون.
मौला की सदा गूंजी, ए मेरे जवां कासिम। मौला की सदा गूंजी, ए मेरे जवां कासिम। मिलता ही नहीं तेरे, मिलता ही नहीं तेरे, लाशे का निशा कासिम। मौला की सदा गूंजी, है मेरे जवां कासिम। مولا کی صدا گونجی اے میرے جواں قاسم کم سن ہے مگر شیرو جیسا ہے جگر اس کا سردار جوانان جنت ہے بدر اس کا کیسے ہوں بھلا تیرے کیسے ہوں بھلا تیرے اوصاف بیاں قاسم مولا کی صدا گونجی اے میرے جواں قاسم مولا کی صدا گونجی اے میرے جواں قاسم سینے سے لگاتے ہیں روتے ہوئے کہتے ہیں اے لال میرے قاسم رخصت تمہیں کرتے ہیں ڈھونڈوں گا بھلا تم کو ڈھونڈوں گا بھلا تم کو اب جا کے کہاں قاسم مولا کی صدا گونجی اے میرے جواں قاسم مولا کی صدا گونجی اے میرے جواں قاسم رخصت ہوئے مادر سے بہنوں سے دعائیں لی اس چاند سے چہرے کی زینب نے بلائیں لی ہو جاؤ گے نظروں سے ہو جاؤ گے نظروں سے اب تم بھی نہاں قاسم مولا کی صدا گونجی اے میرے جواں قاسم مولا کی صدا گونجی اے میرے جواں قاسم میدان میں آتے ہی آدھا کو پکارا ہے میں لال حسن کا ہوں حیدر میرا دادا ہے عباس جری کی ہوں عباس جری کی ہوں میں روح رواں قاسم مولا کی صدا گونجی اے میرے جواں قاسم مولا کی صدا گونجی اے میرے جواں قاسم
قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے روتی ہے پھوپھی اس کی ہائے روتی ہے پھوپھی اس کی نوحہ کو نہ مادر ہے قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے سب خون میں بھرا صحرا پوشاک دریدہ ہے سب خون میں بھرا صحرا پوشاک دریدہ ہے پامال بدل سارا ہے پامال بدل سارا اور خاک کا بستر ہے قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے مہندی ہے لہو والی نوشاہ کے ہاتھوں میں مہندی ہے لہو والی نوشاہ کے ہاتھوں میں سائے کے لیے سر پہ، ہائے سائے کے لیے سر پہ، بس دھوپ کی چادر ہے، قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے، قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے، ٹکڑے تھج گئے جیسے اے مولا حسن تیرا، ٹکڑے تھج گئے جیسے اے مولا حسن تیرا، ٹکڑوں میں یہاں مولا، ہائے ٹکڑوں میں یہاں مولا، ویسے تیرا دل بر ہے، قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے، قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے، ماں کہتی تھی قاسم کی اے لال کہاں جاؤں، ماں کہتی تھی قاسم کی اے لال کہاں جاؤں، غیرے ہوئے خیموں کو، ہائے غیرے ہوئے خیموں کو، کفار کا لشکر ہے، قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے، قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے، ایک گھٹیڑی میں لاتے گئے شبیر یہ کیا رن سے، ایک گٹھڑی میں لاتے گئے شبیر یہ کیا رن سے، آواز فلک آئی، ہائے آواز فلک آئی، لکھتے دل شبر ہے، قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے، روتی ہے پھوپھی اس کی، ہائے روتی ہے پھوپھی اس کی، نوحہ کو نہ مادر ہے، قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے، قاسم کے جنازے پہ کیا درد کا منظر ہے۔
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبو طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا غريب الغرباء، السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته.